The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy. Chapter 3. So Ivan Ilyich's life went on for 17 years after his marriage. He was by now a prosecutor of long standing. He had turned down several transfers waiting for a more desirable post, when something unpleasant happened quite unexpectedly and very nearly wrecked the calm of his life. Ivan Ilyich was expecting the post of presiding judge in a university town, but Hoppy somehow slipped in ahead of him and got the place. Ivan Ilyich lost his temper, reproached him, and quarreled both with Hoppy and with his immediate superiors. People turned cold toward him, and at the next round of appointments he was passed over again. That was in 1880, the hardest year of Ivan Ilyich's life. That year it became clear, on the one hand, that his salary was not enough to live on, and on the other, that everyone had forgotten him, and that what seemed to him the greatest, cruelest injustice looked to other people like a perfectly ordinary matter. Even his father did not feel obliged to help him. He felt that everyone had abandoned him, that they all considered his position, on a salary of $3,500, completely normal, even fortunate. He alone knew that with the injustices done to him weighing on his mind, with his wife's endless nagging, and with the debts he had begun to run up by living beyond his means, he alone knew that his position was far from normal. That summer, to ease the strain on his finances, he took leave and went with his wife to spend the summer in the country, at the home of Praskovia Fyodorovna's brother. In the country, with no work to do, Ivan Ilyich felt for the first time not just boredom, but unbearable anguish. He decided that life could not go on like this, and that it was time for decisive measures. After a sleepless night, all of which he spent pacing the terrace, he made up his mind. He would go to Petersburg and press his case, and to punish them, the people who had failed to appreciate him, he would transfer to another ministry. The next day, despite all the objections of his wife and her brother, he left for Petersburg. He went with a single goal, a post with a salary of $5,000. He no longer cared about any particular ministry or direction or type of work. He simply needed a post at $5,000, in the administration, in banking, on the railways, in the Empress Maria's charitable institutions, even in customs, but it had to be $5,000, and it had to be out of the ministry that had failed to appreciate him. And this trip of Ivan Ilyich's was crowned with astonishing, unexpected success. At Kursk, an acquaintance, F.S. Ilyin, joined him in the first-class carriage and told him about a fresh telegram just received by the governor of Kursk. A shake-up was about to take place in the ministry. Ivan Semyonovich was being appointed to Pyotr Ivanovich's place. The proposed shake-up, apart from what it meant for Russia, had a special meaning for Ivan Ilyich. By raising up a new man, Pyotr Petrovich, and obviously his friend Zakhar Ivanovich, it was highly favorable for Ivan Ilyich. Zakhar Ivanovich was Ivan Ilyich's colleague and friend. In Moscow the news was confirmed, and on reaching Petersburg, Ivan Ilyich found Zakhar Ivanovich and received a firm promise of a post in his old Ministry of Justice. A week later he telegraphed his wife, Zakhar taking Miller's place. I received my appointment at the first report. Thanks to this change of personnel, Ivan Ilyich suddenly received, in his old ministry, an appointment that placed him 2 steps above his former colleagues. $5,000 in salary, plus $3,500 for moving expenses. All his resentment toward his old enemies in the whole ministry was forgotten, and Ivan Ilyich was completely happy. He returned to the country cheerful and content, in a mood he had not known for a long time. Praskovia Fyodorovna brightened too, and a truce was struck between them. Ivan Ilyich told stories about how everyone in Petersburg had celebrated him, how all his old enemies had been put to shame and now groveled before him, how people envied him his position, and above all, how much everyone in Petersburg loved him. Praskovia Fyodorovna listened and pretended to believe it all. She contradicted nothing, and only made plans for their new life in the city they were moving to. And Ivan Ilyich saw with joy that her plans were his plans, that they agreed, and that his life after its stumble was regaining its true and proper character, cheerful ease and decency. He had come back for only a short stay. On the 10th of September he had to take up his post, and besides he needed time to settle into the new place, move everything from the province, buy things, order things, and a great deal more. In short, to arrange it all just as he had decided in his mind, which was almost exactly as Praskovia Fyodorovna had decided in her heart. And now, when everything had worked out so well, and when he and his wife agreed on their goal, and on top of that, saw so little of each other, They got along more warmly than they had since the first years of their married life. Ivan Ilyich thought at first of taking the family with him at once, but his sister and her husband, who had suddenly become remarkably warm and affectionate toward Ivan Ilyich and his family, insisted otherwise. Ivan Ilyich left, and the good mood produced by his success and by the harmony with his wife, each feeding the other, never deserted him. A delightful apartment turned up, exactly what husband and wife had dreamed of. Spacious, high-ceilinged reception rooms in the old style, a grand, comfortable study, rooms for his wife and daughter, a schoolroom for his son. Everything might have been designed just for them. Ivan Ilyich took charge of the arrangements himself. He chose the wallpapers, bought extra furniture, mostly antiques, which to his eye had exactly the right air of refinement, and oversaw the upholstery. And it all grew and approached the ideal he had formed for himself. When he was only halfway through, the result already exceeded his expectations. He could see the elegant, refined, anything but vulgar character the whole place would take on when it was finished. Falling asleep, he pictured the reception room as it would one day be. Looking at the still unfinished drawing room, he could already see the fireplace, the screen, the display shelves, the little chairs scattered about, the dishes and plates on the walls, and the bronzes, all standing in their places. He was delighted by the thought of how he would amaze Pasha and Liza, who had a taste for this sort of thing too. They had no idea what was coming. He had been especially lucky in finding old pieces cheap, pieces that gave the whole place a particularly noble character. In his letters he deliberately made everything sound worse than it was, to surprise them. All this absorbed him so completely that even his new duties, and he loved this work, interested him less than he had expected. During court sessions he had moments of absent-mindedness. He would drift off, wondering whether the curtain cornices should be straight or curved. He was so caught up in it that he often did the work himself, rearranging furniture and rehanging curtains with his own hands. Once he climbed a step-ladder to show an uncomprehending upholsterer how he wanted the draping done, missed his footing, and fell. But strong and agile man that he was, he caught himself, and only knocked his side against the handle of the window frame. The bruise ached for a while, then passed. Through all of this, Ivan Ilyich felt especially cheerful and healthy. He wrote home, "I feel 15 years younger." He expected to finish in September, but it dragged on until the middle of October, and yet the result was charming. Not only he said so, everyone who saw it told him the same. In reality, it was exactly what you find in the homes of all people who are not quite rich, but want to look rich, and who therefore only end up looking like one another. Damasks, ebony, flowers, rugs, and bronzes, everything dark and gleaming. All the things people of a certain kind acquire so as to look like all other people of a certain kind. And his home looked so much like the rest that no one would have given it a second glance, but to him it all seemed exceptional. He was very happy when he met his family at the railway station and brought them to his finished, brightly lit apartment, where a footman in a white tie opened the door into a front hall, decorated with flowers, and then they walked through the drawing room and the study, gasping with pleasure. He led them everywhere, drank in their praise, and beamed with satisfaction. That same evening over tea, when Praskovia Fyodorovna asked him, among other things, how he had fallen, he laughed and acted out for them how he had gone flying and scared the upholsterer half to death. "It's not for nothing I'm a gymnast. Another man would have broken his neck, and I barely knocked myself, right here. It hurts when you touch it, but it's already passing." And they began living in the new home. Whereas always, once you have properly settled in, exactly one room was missing. And on the new income, which as always fell just a little short, about 500 rubles. And it was all very good. It was especially good at first, when not everything was arranged yet, and there was still arranging to do. Buying this, ordering that, moving one thing, adjusting another. Though there were a few disagreements between husband and wife, both were so pleased, and there was so much to do, that it all passed without any big quarrels. When there was nothing left to arrange, life grew a little dull, and something seemed to be missing. But by then they were making acquaintances and forming habits, and life filled up. Ivan Ilyich spent his mornings in court and came home for dinner. And at first his mood was good, though it did suffer a little, precisely on account of the apartment. Every spot on the tablecloth or the damask, every torn curtain cord irritated him. He had put so much work into the arrangement that any damage to it pained him. But on the whole, his life ran the way he believed life should run. Easily, pleasantly, and decently. He got up at 9, drank his coffee, read the paper, then put on his uniform and drove to court. There the harness he worked in had long since been broken in, and he slipped straight into it. Petitioners, inquiries at the chancery itself, the sessions, public and administrative. In all of this, the skill lay in shutting out everything raw and alive, everything that always disrupts the smooth flow of official business. You must allow no relations with people outside the official ones. The occasion for contact must always be official, and the contact itself official too. Say a man comes in and wants to know something. Ivan Ilyich, outside his official role, can have no relations whatsoever with such a man. But if the man's business relates to him as a member of the court, in some way that can be expressed on paper with a letterhead, then within those relations, Ivan Ilyich will do everything, absolutely everything that can be done, and will keep up all the while a semblance of friendly human relations, that is to say, courtesy. The moment the official relation ends, everything else ends too. This skill of splitting off the official side and keeping it clear of his real life was one Ivan Ilyich possessed in the highest degree. Through long practice and natural talent he had refined it so far that, like a virtuoso, he occasionally allowed himself, as if in play, to mix the human and the official. He allowed himself that because he felt the strength in him, whenever he needed it, to pull the official back out and drop the human. And this all went for Ivan Ilyich, not just easily, pleasantly, and decently, but with real virtuosity. In the breaks he smoked, drank tea, chatted a little about politics, a little about general matters, a little about cards, and most of all about appointments. And tired, but with the feeling of a virtuoso who had played his part cleanly, one of the first violins in the orchestra, he returned home. At home his daughter and her mother had been out visiting somewhere, or had a visitor of their own. His son was at school, did his homework with tutors, and diligently learned what schoolboys are taught. Everything was good. After dinner, if there were no guests, Ivan Ilyich sometimes read whatever book everyone was talking about, and in the evening he sat down to work, reading documents, consulting the statutes, comparing testimony, and matching it against the law. He found this neither dull nor entertaining. It was dull when he could have been playing cards, but if there was no game to be had, it was still better than sitting alone, or with his wife. And Ivan Ilyich's pleasures were small dinner parties, to which he invited ladies and gentlemen of good social standing, and time spent with them that looked exactly like the way such people usually spend their time, just as his drawing room looked like every other drawing room. Once they even gave an evening party with dancing. Ivan Ilyich enjoyed himself, and everything went well, except for a big quarrel with his wife over the cakes and sweets. Praskovia Fyodorovna had her own plan, but Ivan Ilyich insisted on ordering everything from an expensive confectioner, and he ordered too many cakes. The quarrel came because cakes were left over and the confectioner's bill was 45 rubles. It was a big, ugly quarrel. So ugly that Praskovia Fyodorovna called him a fool and a whiner. And he clutched his head and in his fury said something about divorce. But the party itself was merry. The best society was there, and Ivan Ilyich danced with Princess Trufanova, sister of the woman famous for founding the society called Carry My Sorrow Away. His official joys were the joys of pride. His social joys were the joys of vanity. But Ivan Ilyich's real joys were the joys of cards. He admitted it. After everything, after whatever joyless events life might bring, the joy that burned like a candle brighter than all the rest was to sit down to a game with good players and quiet partners. 4 exactly, because with 5 it stings to sit out, however much you pretend you love it, and to play a clever, serious game when the cards cooperate, and then have supper and a glass of wine. And after cards, especially after a small win, a big one is unpleasant, Ivan Ilyich went to bed in a particularly good mood. So they lived. The circle they gathered around them was of the very best. Important people came to the house, and young people too. In their view of this circle, husband, wife, and daughter were in perfect agreement. Without ever discussing it, each of them shook off and pushed away the assorted shabby friends and relatives who came fluttering in, gushing with affection, to the drawing room with the Japanese plates on the walls. Soon these shabby friends stopped fluttering in, and the Golovins were left with the very best society and no other. Young men courted Liza, and Petrushev, an examining magistrate, son of Dmitry Ivanovich Petrushev and sole heir to his fortune, began paying her serious attention, so that Ivan Ilyich had already raised the question with Praskovia Fyodorovna. Should they arrange a troika ride for the young people or get up some amateur theatricals? So they lived, and everything went on like this, without change,